For our next panel, we're going to extend from the earlier panels. There's been a theme in this conference today about the need and the desire of all of us to have a better articulation of how fiduciary is different. So in this panel, we're going to move beyond what's going on in the broker world and how we're different from that and what's happened in the past. And instead, we're going to see how close we can get to delineating what is it that fiduciary firms do? Not what we don't do, but what do we do in each of the areas? So I've asked the panel members to engage in a thought experiment. We're going to pretend that we are brainstorming about a mail order kit, and the kit is how to build and run a fiduciary planning firm. And I'm going to ask the panel a bunch of questions in each of the different areas, of starting with purpose and mission, going through firm structure, staff, clients, firm quality control, relations with our professional colleagues, and then in the big picture, what does it all mean? And what we're listening for, and what we hope you will get as audience members, is if you're running a fiduciary planning firm, we hope this panel will be like a checklist. You can go through, I'm doing that, I can get better at this, wow, I didn't even know about that. We hope then you'll have insights and practical tips. And we're also hoping that these guys will be very frank about, in running large fiduciary planning firms, what are the issues in terms of making that work at the firm level. Because I think all of you know that we have an all-star panel here with Tom Orecchio, Dan Moyson, Joel Isaacson. All these guys know what the broker world is like, and they are in the cohort of advisors who lifted our part of the world from being a bunch of small practices, almost tradesmen, into having real firms, real scale, and a real impact on the industry. So the benefit of this panel is to hear from these people, what does it take to make a fiduciary culture embed all the way through your firm, particularly as it gets larger. So to start off, we're going to start with purpose and mission. And here's the image. You've ordered this kit, and it has been delivered to your doorstep by UPS or Amazon or whatever. And you open up the kit, and there's a manual, and it says how to build a fiduciary financial planning firm. And the first sentence says, this kit will help you build a firm that, and that's important because. So, Tom, why don't you start?
Okay. So, like a lot of you in the room, I don't think we needed to give this too much thought. Being a fee-only firm for a long time, I thought it was pretty straightforward that the kit would be designed to help you build a structure and a culture that promotes transparency and that avoids conflicts of interest. And when conflicts of interest continue to exist, that they're properly managed and properly disclosed to the client. And I think that's important because we believe that this is in the best interest of our clients, and ultimately what's in the best interest of our clients is in the best interest of our firm.
Yeah, okay, so purpose and mission. I mean, there's a saying that all businesses exist to alleviate some pain in some way. And there's a lot of pain for the public with respect to personal finances. It's a very stressful subject matter. It's right up there with all the other big ones that affect families. And the world's getting more and more complex all the time from a personal finance standpoint. More and more the responsibility keeps getting pushed onto the public. So our mission is to help clients alleviate some of that stress. And to do that, we have to have processes and procedures in place. And I think a lot of that comes from the natural financial planning process, but when you overlay that into a fiduciary environment, there's other processes and procedures that you can lay over that to make sure that you're avoiding as many conflicts as possible and managing the ones that remain.
I say this with the best interest, and I apologize if anything there, but being around now for I know it'd be hard to believe, I think 33 or 34 years now, I do think that the industry has changed somewhat in the part where, for us, I think the issue of planning first is what I always felt was the key for NAPFA. For example, for us, like certain people come to us and say, here's $2 million, will you manage for us? That's not our business, and we don't really want that business. So I do think the environment of NAPFA and the planning first is key from the client perspective as to what's most important for them. I do think in the industry a lot, the differentiation I see is a lot of firms became AUM driven, and that became kind of the key for them. And I think that became something that I think has changed somewhat of the industry. So I do think the planning first mantra, and again, everything that everyone said on the panel and in earlier is very important. But I do think the plan is the key for us is to, again, do no harm, do what's in the client's best interest, and let that be the driving force. We also don't really have a sales culture. I don't know if we're spoiled in New York because, again, being Tom's in New Jersey, I could say it. There's really not competition in New York with other advisors or NAPFA. So we can grow our top line 8 to 10% a year just through referrals. So no one in the firm does any marketing, and that's not what kind of culture that we have where it's driven by sales.
Let's move on to firm structure, and how about if you guys dive in where it makes sense for you. What I'm thinking of is when you start a firm, you make a choice of how you are regulated, which seems to me is one of the first differentiating questions a potential client can ask of an advisor is how are you regulated? But what about credentials, what professional groups you hang out from, where do you learn, and what about ownership? Who owns you and what do you own?
Start here again?
All right,
Okay. Which question do you want me to answer first?
Setting up firm structure.
Yes.
What's important?
Well, geez, what's important? All of it's important. So our structures, we have 5 owners. We're not owned by anybody. Each client has 2 advisors that work with them, client service administrator. All of the portfolio management function is taken care of by a separate portfolio department that helps alleviate a lot of the issues that can come up in an investment arena, because you have policies, procedures, you have investment committees that are making the decisions about what vehicles to use in the portfolios and how to use those, so the individual advisors don't have to deal with handling that. They do interface with the investment department, but we've got that as a separate function, and all they do is focus on that type of thing. What was the other question?
Anything that, if these people are building a firm on your kit, and the chapter is on
Yeah.
setting up the firm structure,
Yeah.
what do they really need to think about, and what do they not want to do?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that we have it set up that way is because we didn't want to be spending so much time on the nuts and bolts of the investment management function. So you could also use a TAMP to do this. We chose to do it internally. Early on, if you're literally got the kit and you're on day one, you're doing a lot of these things on your own, and you have to envision how your personal capacity is constrained and what kind of help you're going to need along the way. So along the way, that's what we've been doing. We've been laying out, and we have right now another 10 years worth of growth projections and personnel projections and client count projections, and that helps us make sure that we're doing what we can to try to stay up to speed on our staffing.
So it sounds like our firm's very similar to Dan's firm. I would add that we have an investment policy statement and we have a client agreement, and the wording in both of those speaks to what's in our ADV about being a fiduciary and having a fiduciary oath, so that clients are aware that we will always act in their best interest and that there will still be conflicts of interest, and that those will be managed to the best of our ability, and we'll be transparent about communicating those to clients if and when they pop up. We have 11 owners. I think one of the things that's difficult for us is we have multiple locations, and we want to make sure that there is an owner at each location so that we are spreading that culture from location to location, because we want clients at all of the locations to get the same type of experience they would get regardless of which one they walk into.
So for us, we have 6 shareholders in our management company, but we do have an outside investor. We did a deal 9 years ago with Focus Financial, and again, it's one where obviously there can be conflicts. There are other focus firms around the country, some which are, I think they try to kick us out of NAP for a while because one of them not own a broker-dealer. One of the deals with Focus is we have management control we have management control over how we handle our clients. The only thing they have control over is the accounting and the compliance side. so they can't tell us, to do any sales process there. And again, it's one where generally all our financial advisors are CFP and been trained, and again, most of them have gone through extensive tax training also, because we do a lot of in-house tax work. So we have multiple people on a team, an investment committee, but it's not a separate one. It's pretty much headed by me, that runs the investment and has a recommended list of the funds that each advisor can work within.
I'd like to turn now to staff, and we all know that finding staff is a really important and very challenging part of the business. I have a personal curiosity whether you guys think that a fiduciary outlook is innate, or is it something that you train? When you're interviewing a potential staff member, is it innate, or do you think we can train this person? Also, in our industry, we talk a lot about fiduciary, and we have some CE, and we have some initial training that we take a test on. But where do we actually have fiduciary training for staff? And it's a bonus question, you can say how you compensate staff so that they have the motivation that is in alignment with a fiduciary culture.
So I would say, first of all, we put no sales pressure. We do much better with people right out of college. People that come with 10 years of experience, we haven't had great success with over time, if they're a lateral transfer. So we'd rather get them out of school and train them, and zero sales pressure on anyone until they become a director. And then it's, again, that sales pressure, but just people in our firm can make a very nice living as a client service advisor. And then they get to a point, you say, if you really want to make money from here, business development will be a key for you, I think, from that standpoint also. But no pressure from a standpoint as far as sales. And, I think, it's the examples of before that we gave of the mortgage payoff. When you bring people in on day one and you get into a situation where you tell, we probably pay off more mortgages than any firm that's out there. We also, just from a bias, we're probably 80% retainer base, which I think is the least conflicted for financial advisors. So again, I think from a standpoint that when you get into a situation of mortgages, it shows them you're doing what I think staff will see on a periodic basis, the best interest of them. We have $500 million with a outside money management firm that we use our buying power to get the best fee for the clients. We're not good at individual bonds. They do it from a standpoint there. Most firms, I think, in the industry, and I'm excluding NAPFA firms, would want to have that money as AUM and get the fee that goes with us. For us, again, is we feel like it's in the best interest, and that's the culture that's permeating from day one within the firm.
Yeah, to your question about fiduciary training, I mean, there are some programs out there, at least with respect to investments, FI 360 type programs. Is it something that is trainable, or is it something that's innate? I suspect it's probably trainable, but we haven't tried to train it. What we try to do is we tried to hire for that mentality to start with, and that's worked very well for us. So, as a fiduciary, what you're supposed to be doing, financial planning fiduciary, is you're supposed to be trying to figure out what's best for this family. What are the things that they need to do, how they marshal their resources, what obstacles they have in place, get all that stuff coordinated for them. And what we want for employees is we want employees that are coming with the mindset of my job is to figure out what's best for these people. And that's very different, and we have had no success, probably because of this, with breakaway brokers. Because they've been working for the most part in a position where their job is to figure out how to get somebody to do something that makes them or their firm money. Very different mindset. There are brokers over there that quote, see the light, come over from the dark side and all that. Don't get me wrong, that definitely happens. We haven't had any of them successfully come to our firm. Everything that we've seen in that area, the mindset is just wrong.
So on comp, we are mostly base and bonus, and the bonus is two components. It's how the company's doing and how the individual's doing. We don't have sales guidelines for any of our people. We talk a lot about it, and we've never really implemented that. We've also not had any luck with breakaway brokers. My conversations, New York City is loaded with brokerage firms, and my conversation usually ends when they say, well, what are my productivity requirements and what's my payout going to be? And that's usually early in the conversation, and then once again, we end the conversation and say thank you very much and good luck, but that's not a good fit for us. So we see that time and again where we're located. In terms of teaching or training for fiduciary, we have a compliance training twice a year, and embedded in that compliance training are some fiduciary issues. Conferences are a good example. We do disclose in our ADV that there are soft dollars involved in going to conferences, and we acknowledge that that's the case, and that we do go to conferences where the rate may be reduced because we're advisors as opposed to members of the public. We also have things like agreements about divorce with our clients, where we would end the relationship and have them sign 2 separate agreements, and are usually assigned 2 separate advisors to try to avoid additional conflicts of managing that divorce process. So our staff does get trained in all of this at least once a year, and mostly twice a year.
Staying on the topic of staff, how do, especially as firms grow large, how do you keep a fiduciary mentality fresh? What are some of the any small practical tips or aha moments that you've had? Training is one of them. So twice a year you've got really embedded training. But on the day-to-day, what do you see in your firm that makes you feel good? What makes you worry? What do you talk about in the boardroom? What have you heard just in practical tips? How do you keep staff not only tuned into fiduciary, but really feeling good about it?
Well, we haven't really had much of an issue keeping staff feeling good about it. Again, we're hiring specifically for that kind of mentality. So it's a strange question for me to try to answer. We just haven't. It never seems unfresh.
Okay.
Because it's there all the time.
So that's the dilemma. We all feel that way, but the public doesn't know what fiduciary is. So we're all pumped up about feeling fiduciary, but when people come in, one of the things we're trying to get at is, how do they know that?
Well, we have ours as part of our mission statement, and that's on the walls and it's on the desks, and we reinforce it at our staff meetings. But like Dan said, this is the easiest question of them all, because it's never hard to take the high road. I think it's always pretty easy to take the high road, and I think our staff finds it refreshing if they work somewhere else where that may not be the standard, and then they come to a NAPFA-style firm where we all believe in doing what's in the best interest of the client. So we have hired staff members, administrative staff people, away from the banks and the brokerage firms, and they've told us that it's just refreshing. We haven't hired advisors because, again, it's usually about productivity and payouts.
The only thing that I would add to that is I think it does lead by example. And we have 4 planning partners, and I think the staff learns from that. Whether it's the para planners or the staff planners and different things. So I think it really all comes from the top, and just the culture that you have, and again, lack of any productivity situation that would make them infected by non-fiduciary thoughts.